Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Zoom series. And the series has been all on Title IX land use codes and the city's proposed updates. Today, we are focusing on all things ADUs, and I'm happy to be joined by Steve Chase, a Planning Commission member, and Catherine Gunther, our city planner. Steve has spent a great deal of time digging into all things ADUs, really getting familiar with other communities and their experiences with ADUs, as well as creations of guidelines. Often reflecting on other community successful guidelines and how those could be put into place if ADUs are to happen in Yachats. If you're just joining us for the first time, welcome. If you've been here through all of the Zooms and or have tuned in afterwards, thank you for participating and your continued engagement. I do want to give a brief reminder that all recordings from all the Zooms we've done are available on our City of Yachats YouTube page. And we've been following a pretty consistent agenda with opening up with an overview from our planning commission member that's with us on each Zoom, and we'll do that again after he gives his overview. We will touch on some of the sentiments and questions that were gathered from the July 14th community engagement session and follow up by opening the floor for dialogue and questions coming from those that are joining us today. So Steve, go ahead and take the floor.
All right. Thanks, Bobby. I want to start with a short presentation, and I appreciate your patience. The the feeling here is that I'm becoming the Yachats resident expert on ADUs, but that's not necessarily the case. It's just that I've been doing quite a bit of reading and reaching out to other communities regarding ADUs. And this really started from one of the presentations from our consultant. I just thought, well, it'd be good for one of the commissioners to step up and pick out this particular topic. So that was my motivation to do that. So let me just kind of read through my presentation, and then we'll open it up for feedback and dialogue and questions, comments. I want to start with the current status of the code revision process. After 7 workshop sessions and 14 hours, the Planning Commission has finally completed the line-by-line reading of the code changes recommended by the consultant. The 104-page document combined the state-required elements with the optional elements, but the commissioners needed to understand both the mandated provisions and the optional recommendations before we could begin to discuss the optional elements in detail. During the line-by-line reading and discussion, City Manager Bobby Price took notes of the items that the commissioners flagged for detailed discussion later. We've also highlighted the words, sentences, and paragraphs in the code revision document that pertain to the 6 optional categories. At the next workshop meeting on August 17th, the commission will begin to review the previous discussion notes and the specific line items in the document that have the optional elements. In other words, we haven't even begun to start talking about the optional elements in detail yet, but we're going to. Like all other Planning Commission meetings, the workshop on August 17th is open to the public in person or on Zoom. At a recent commission meeting, Commissioner Diamond suggested that we break apart the optional items from the state mandated items and give more time and consideration for the optional items. City resident Sue May suggested the same thing in her letter of July 21st. The detailed consideration and discussion of the optional items is the plan for our next workshop steps. After the commission reviews the optional elements, we will discuss the possibility of breaking apart the code revisions into 2 or more ordinances. One drawback of this idea is the added legal and consulting cost of creating 2 code revisions compared to 1. Now, the Planning Commission can finally dig into the optional issues. Our main topic today is accessory dwelling units, ADUs, also called accessory residential units. But before we start on the ADUs, let's look quickly at the optional item list. Because from a lot of the comments we've received, I think there's a lot of confusion about how big a task this is. And from my previous experience in real estate and real estate finance, what we're looking at here is not that big a task. Option 1 is cottage clusters. The city has the option to adopt a housing category called middle housing as defined by the state. The section on middle housing defines cottage clusters, also known as patio homes or courtyard homes, duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, and townhomes. ADUs are defined in a separate section. The city of Yachats already has zoning codes for duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes. So the only middle housing type currently missing from our code is cottage clusters. Catherine, if I misspeak, jump in. Okay. The decision on option one is whether to allow cottage clusters at all. And if that is approved, which zone should they be permitted in? Option two, middle housing types in residential zones. Large cities are required by state law to permit all of these middle housing types in all residential zones. Since Yachats has a population of less than 2,500, this mandate does not apply to Yachats. Specifically for Yachats, the current proposed code revision gives the option to include cottage clusters and duplexes in the R1 zone and cottage clusters and triplexes in the R2 zone. The decision on option two is whether to allow duplexes and or cottage clusters in R1 and whether to allow triplexes and or cottage clusters in R2. Hold on just a sec. I got to get a sip. All right, move to option three, design standards. Lauren Anderson yesterday had a presentation on this. The state has provided a model code for small cities that includes basic design standards for new building structures of 3 or more units. The proposed design standards section is available for you to review in the proposed code on the city website. The decision on option three is whether to adopt design standards for 3+ unit properties or not. Option four is permitting mixed residential and commercial use in the C1 commercial zone. Yachats already has properties in the city with mixed uses now. The decision on option four is whether to outright permit a residential unit and a commercial building on the same C1 lot. Option five is to revise development standards for middle housing and ADUs. These standards have 3 parts: reducing setbacks for flexibility in site planning, increasing lot coverage percentage of structure to land, and changing the required number of on-property parking spaces, or call it off-street parking. There are 3 development change decisions here. On setbacks, whether to reduce setback feet from the current setbacks to give siting flexibility or to keep the status quo. On lot coverage, whether to allow more lot coverage for higher density. And another discussion is whether or not we might tie the height restrictions to lot coverage to encourage 1 and 2 level structures instead of 3 level structures. On parking, whether to decrease the number of on-property parking spaces or keep the status quo. And finally, we get to ADUs. Option 6 is permitting ADUs with standards, guidelines, and defined process. This would relate to single dwellings only. They'd be permitted in zones where single dwellings are permitted. We would select guidelines and standards with guidance from other Oregon cities, and we would research ADU development experience with other Oregon cities in Lincoln County. Now, after the community meeting, it occurred to me from feedback from the community that we have 4 possible decisions regarding ADUs. Decision 1 is to leave any mention of ADUs out of the code. Currently, the city does not have language in the zoning code for ADUs. Leaving the code silent is impractical because there have been homeowners who built an accessory structure or guest house and added a kitchen later, or they remodeled the interior of their home or garage and created a separate residential space without notifying the city. It is impossible to enforce a code that doesn't exist. This option is a discussion for the Do Nothing Zoom meeting that's scheduled for next Wednesday. And doing nothing is an option, as we've talked about at the community meeting. But it has drawbacks. Decision number 2, ban ADUs completely. Some people in the community have decided that they don't want ADUs at all. This option has a similar enforcement difficulty as the current situation. The city does not have the staff or budget for suing property owners who violate a ban. Decision 3, and this may be the one that we adopt, we'll see, is to permit ADUs in a passive manner as an accommodation for property owners who want to convert part of their home or garage or build a small detached cottage in their backyard. In other words, permit ADUs but not promote them. And decision 4 would be to permit and promote ADUs as a part of a solution for needed housing, as the city of Ashland has done, and we'll talk about Ashland here in a minute. Even with active promotion since 2014, the ratio of ADUs to total housing units in Ashland is only 2.2%. Ashland has 10 times the number of housing units as Yachats, and currently they have 219 ADUs. At this same ratio, Yachats would have 22 ADUs in 10 to 15 years. I did ask Ashland for a breakdown between internal and detached ADUs, and they don't have that breakdown, but we'll continue to look for that kind of a ratio. So we can't predict how many detached ADUs Yachats might have in 10 years, but let's say it's 10 to 15. In other words, we're not talking about a massive influx of cottages in people's backyards if we were to go forward with this. If Yachats is to have a section of the zoning code for ADUs, we want it to be thoughtful, complete, and wisely written. This requires even more study and research and community input. So this is still an ongoing process. Before we get into the weeds on ADUs, I want to note the written comments from residents the city's received so far, specifically comments about ADUs, and I will respond with my thoughts. Your additional comments and questions are welcome today. One of the recurring comments I've heard is whether the city government and the planning commission are listening. And I want to assure you that we read and we read every email that comes in, and we listen to every presentation in person. Until today, I've not had an opportunity to respond to these questions. So this is our chance to have more dialogue. Take a short break here. Getting dry. On July 4th, we received a letter from Carolyn Ackerman, a single dwelling homeowner in Yachats. She wants to hire a local contractor to convert her detached garage into a cottage for her father. She assures that it will be finished with high quality materials and will be an added value for her property. In the future, she wants to rent it out as a residence, not a short-term vacation rental. And she's a business person with experience in rental management. So far, this is the only resident who has approached us with a firm desire to create an ADU on their property. So she's waiting on us to create something in the code to be able to do that. There was another person at the community meeting who asked me about his building idea, and his description of his plan would fit under an ADU program. On July 24th, we received a letter from the Jim Stratton family indicating they have room in their backyard to add a small cottage for family use. So we have three people that are interested in an ADU, doing an ADU project. I guess my point here is that we're not being overwhelmed with ADU requests. On July 10th, we received a letter from Chuck Bailey, architect, who suggests reducing setbacks to allow room for an ADU. On July 12th, we received a letter from John Harms, who is opposed to ADUs on small lots and is opposed to building up to 3 levels, blocking views for the neighbors. My response is that the current proposal is to limit detached ADUs to 15 feet or 1 level. Stacy Rosenberg wrote to express her concern that the Planning Commission should anticipate the result of any optional changes and provide two-way communication. This overall concern relates to the decision options on ADUs, whether they can be added to the community without changing the town's character. Sue May wrote on July 21st, expressing her desire to leave R1 alone. She doesn't mention ADUs specifically, but this is a vote for not permitting AUs in R1. She also asked to separate the state-mandated changes from the optional changes. My response is that the Planning Commission will begin to discuss the optional changes at our next workshop meeting on August 14th. And we are also considering recommending to the City Council to break the code changes into 2 ordinances. If we go down this path, it will cost more money in consulting and legal fees.
Just
On
going to
May
interrupt you really quick. August 17th, just in case anybody's taking notes, is our
August
next meeting.
17th, yeah, that's our next
Yes.
meeting,
Okay.
right?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Okay, at 2 o'clock.
Yes.
Yeah. On May 23rd, the Prince Reed family wrote in opposition to ADUs and all other optional changes. Their concern is that the city is moving too fast without adequate safeguards. They asked for mandatory design standards for ADUs and multi-unit properties. My response is that it may be possible to have a design requirement, and perhaps that a detached ADU might be constructed with the same materials as the main house. We've also talked about having free or low-cost design plans, which Ashland has done, and their design plans are small cottages that would fit into the community. I don't believe the state allows for specific design standards for ADUs, but something we'll look at it again, do more research on. The Prince Reed family is also opposed to aggressively marketing ADUs with market rents or allowing them to be used for short-term vacation rentals. My response is that the current discussion includes restricting ADUs from short-term lodging rentals. We're also discussing restricting the main dwelling unit, the main home for short-term rentals. So if we go down that path, anyone who puts an ADU or has an ADU in their home or their yard would be restricted on getting a license for a short-term rental, something to consider. Um, Prince Reed family also addresses the workforce housing need with income and rent cap restrictions like the Fistera project, for example. They also ask for more time for community participation and input. They're concerned the city's roads, stormwater, wastewater, and public services must keep pace with growth. My response is that this is being addressed by city water and wastewater staff. Roads and streets we've not really gotten into, but we do need to discuss uh, the growth, projected growth for the city and how roads and streets would keep up. On July 15th, Drew Rosland, owner of the Overleaf Lodge and Fireside Motel, wrote in favor of infill ADUs and multifamily units where practical. He notes that smaller dwelling units typically result in more modest rents. My response is that since Yachats has almost no supply of monthly rental units of any size, even a few rental ADUs would be welcome for moderate income residents. Kevin Erdahl wrote on July 14 that he is in favor of ADUs, but would require ADUs to have a building permit regardless of the size of the unit. And I believe, Catherine, if you'll agree with me, that's required.
Yes.
Um, Kevin is in favor of ADUs having a separate water meter from the primary residence. My response is that the city of Ashland requires an external ADU to use the main house water meter and sewer hookup to reduce unnecessary building expense and ongoing expense. ADUs are small and designed to be occupied by one or two or three occupants, so their additional water and wastewater use would be minimal. He also asks that any existing ADUs be inspected for compliance with building codes. On July 28th, Lauren Castellino wrote with her concerns about the zoning code revision process and asked for clearly stated objectives with reliable data, analyze the intended benefits and costs of changes. She is opposed to detached ADUs over 800 square feet in size. My response is that we're in the process of gathering accurate data from other Oregon communities, some of which we have now, and we're going to be getting more. The early discussions in the commission propose a maximum size for a detached ADU of 800 square feet. And from a practical standpoint, and this is something that Ashland promotes, is smaller cottages are preferred. Lauren is also concerned that if a homeowner adds an ADU, it will increase the value of their property and possibly increase rental costs. My response is that property owners spend their money on improvements to increase the market value of their property. This is a natural thing that homeowners do. Rental rates, like home market values, are determined by supply and demand. Since there's little supply of monthly rental housing in Yachats, the rental cost is high now. If there were 15 or 20 monthly rental units, the rental rate would go down. Lauren is also concerned about the city's ability to enforce the zoning codes. My response is that Yachats depends on residents to do the right thing. The city does not have extra financial resources to file lawsuits against bad actors. The city does respond to neighbor complaints as they arise, and we now have a part-time code compliance officer. Lauren asked for a whole picture synergistic method for proposed changes. She asked for specific policies before adopting code changes. Hold on a sec. Uh, the key part of this process, my response is that the key part of the process that we're going through is discussing and considering the policies that we think fit Yachats, tempered by input from residents. So the setting of policies is still an ongoing process. Lauren asked for a written opinion from the city's attorney regarding state mandated changes, and we have a copy of that at City Hall, and I would imagine it can be posted on the website. She requests a study of
Yes.
ADU rents and prefers internal conversions over detached cottages. From a visual standpoint, I wholeheartedly agree. We have internal ADUs in Yachats now that no one knows they're there, including one down the hill from my house. So an internal ADU is preferred from a visual standpoint, but an external ADU can also fit into the landscape. Let's see. Lauren also objects to reducing setbacks to make room for a detached ADU. She's concerned there could be hundreds of ADUs built and the city staff could not keep up with rules enforcement. My response, and we'll cover this with the city of Ashland here in a moment. They've been actively promoting ADUs for more than 10 years, and the ratio of ADUs to total housing units is 2.2%. Yachats will likely experience one, two, or three ADU permit requests per year. And after 10 years, we could have as many as 20 to 25 ADUs. Lauren stated that she had seen that Portland had a 26% uptake in ADUs, but it's actually 1% or closer to 1%. The 26% number probably comes from multifamily and middle housing uptake. Portland has a lot of multi-unit housing. She asked about Ashland's ADU experience. We're going to cover that shortly. She mentions the ability of a homeowner to rent their ADU or their primary residence or both. This isn't anticipated by state law. It is allowed. We will also discuss the discussion regarding restricting short-term rentals both for the ADU and for the main residence. We also need to discuss financing and professional property management to help homeowners who want to build an ADU. On July 25th, Adina Marinlander wrote in favor of allowing ADUs to increase housing availability and provide homeowners increased flexibility. ADUs allow for more housing in existing residential areas, preventing sprawl into farmland and forests, along with improving community vitality and nature conservation. Let's take a quick look at comments regarding ADUs at the community meeting. These are notes that people wrote on the whiteboard at my table. One person said, I support allowing ADUs on lots that can accommodate them. Another person said, I like having ADU guidelines or standards that will allow people to generate income and age in place. Another person said, ADUs are not a problem if we maintain current lot coverages and setbacks. Another person said, 1,000 square feet is too big. Portland is 800 square feet. Another person wrote, ADUs can be 30 feet high. And my response is that our proposal is 15-foot limit. And another person wrote, no ADUs for vacation use. On the note cards that people turned in, one asked, will there be an appeal process for neighbors who have concerns about a proposed additional unit? And this is a question for Catherine. If someone applies for an ADU building permit, will the neighbors have the opportunity to appeal and try to stop someone from building an ADU in their backyard?
If it were an outright permitted use under our code, then no. In some cases, so if there were any component of it that varied from the standards, that would require a variance approval through the planning commission. So then there is an opportunity for testimony at a hearing and then to appeal the decision of the planning commission. The same would go for conditional use. But if anything that's adopted as a permitted use with a set list of standards, the property owners abiding by those, then no appeal process.
Okay. Another note card said, in Eugene, I see many of these second units that fit in well and respect neighbors' privacy and views. Unfortunately, I also see units that destroy a neighbor's views and privacy. How will these concerns be managed? And my response is that if we have a full set of standards and guidelines and a defined process with active involvement of Catherine, our city planner, we should be able to avoid situations where neighbors' views and privacy are impaired. But that comes back to that list of guidelines that we'll go over here shortly. Here another person wrote, if everyone built an ADU on their property, the growth would exceed the 30% stated in the presentation. How is that controlled? And we can get back to the projected experience, excuse me, the past experience of Ashland and other communities. I still have to hear back from Florence, Newport, Lincoln County, Rockaway Beach. And I'm going to do some homework on the city of Portland as well.
I just want to jump in really quick, and that was actually 3% that was in the presentation, not
Oh, it was
30%.
3%,
So
wasn't it? That was
yeah,
okay.
three. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not going to have that kind of growth here. Um, Another person asked, "Do you have the ability to prevent ADUs from becoming nightly rentals?" And the answer is yes. We would restrict that, as every other community that we've looked at does. Um, Here's another person that said, "Please increase density in any practical manner." So there's someone that wants more density. Here's another person that said, "Code enforcement is lacking. How are you going to enforce codes for the additional ADUs?" And they're unhappy with switching to a 5 foot setback. My response is that at this time, we don't have ADU codes to enforce. In a few cases, property owners have been required to remove a kitchen and stop offering a property for rent. But Yachats is so small, we have to expect our neighbors to comply with guidelines and rules without a police oversight or court or a lawsuit. But first step in enforcement is to have a good set of codes and rules to follow, which we don't have yet. Another person said, "I prefer 800 square foot size limit. Um, Allow for internal conversions. Please address how this will not increase all costs. Please address how this does not become a magnet for investors and second home buyers." And this is a good discussion. To what degree are outside developers and risk capital interested in coming into Yachats and building infill homes or rental units? To date, we haven't had much uh, any indication from outside developers that want to come in and spend a lot of money here. And to some degree, it's a chicken and egg scenario here. We don't have a lot of land available to develop, and it's scattered and difficult for an investor to gain efficiencies. Uh, in my experience, uh, investment capital is drawn to places where you can build 100 or more units in one place because it's easier to manage. And I don't believe we have any parcels of land here big enough to build a 100 unit apartment complex. Okay. Another person mentioned ADU guidelines. Put ADUs on lots that can support them. And they said ADUs or a duplex are not a problem in R1 if we maintain current setbacks. Another person was confusing ADUs with SROs, which I think we addressed at the meeting. SROs are completely different from an ADU. ADUs are designed for occupancy by one or two or three people. A shared occupancy scenario is where you have 4 or 5 or 6 people living in one home and they share a kitchen. Here's a question for Catherine. If a current house is already 30 feet high, would we allow an ADU over a garage to equal 30 feet?
We would not consider that a detached ADU when right now the draft, the 15-foot height limit is strictly for detached.
Okay.
Now, I made the assumption that the garage is attached to the house. Um,
If the
so
garage
that's
was
that's
detached from the house, though, we have a different story,
we would have a different story.
right?
And right now the draft says 15 feet, which is in line with our current code. We would call a detached garage that falls into the category of accessory structure. And we have a 15-foot height limit now for any accessory structure. So that was sort of carried over into the ADUs to allow people to convert an existing accessory structure. But if you took that detached garage and attempted to put something on top of that, that would not be allowed in our current code, and it's not
And
allowed in the
I do
proposed.
want to jump in really quick. That is something that's on our list to
It
talk
is on our
about.
list.
Okay.
Yes,
Well, this was
yes.
this was a scenario that Ron Simons brought up at the meeting and kind of blindsided me a little bit because it was a scenario that I hadn't considered. Uh, I think about if you want to be economical and you're careful about how you spend your money, your remodeling money, and you have a detached garage, you're not going to build on top of it. You're going to just use the structure that's there for convert it to an ADU.
I guess the reason that question comes up, though, then it's about meeting the off-street parking requirements. So if you
Oh,
decommission that garage for parking, you would have to replace those two required spaces for the primary residence plus add whatever was required for the ADU. So I could see why people might want to go in that
oh,
direction.
Yeah, and that's
okay.
exactly why. that's exactly why we're bringing it back to conversation to see if maybe there's a variance process for somebody who wanted to use their detached garage and put an ADU on top specifically to use because that's the only way they can get their off-street parking is that
Okay.
garage. So that's part of
Okay.
the conversations we'll be having.
All right. I appreciate that. I didn't quite understand from a kind of a common sense thing why you'd
Yeah, and
even
then
want to do
Steve, do you
that,
want
but
to we're getting to 3:30 now. Do you want to hit on some of the guidelines that we're talking about?
yeah, let's go ahead. It's taking longer than I thought. I'm sorry. Okay, so, Neil, if you'll bring up slide number one. Permits. Uh, this is from the Oregon Housing Law Library online. Anybody can look this up. It's under their FAQs, and I didn't reprint everything on their frequently asked questions, but the key points here. What is an ADU? For those of you that are joining us here, this is something that you can read later. I'm not going to read it line by line here, but some kind of basic things relating to ADUs, design standards. Um, Scroll down if you would, Neil. ADUs considered middle housing? No, that's a separate category. Um, there's a paragraph here about what is the difference between an ADU and a duplex. And then the last section here talks about covenants, conditions, and restrictions and deed restrictions. And this will be a topic that we'll be discussing at some length. But as Catherine reminds me, and our city attorney has reminded me, the city is not involved in enforcing deed restrictions. It's a contract between homeowners in a neighborhood. Um, the state does have a provision where they have invalidated certain restrictions for middle housing and ADUs. Um, and depending on the scenario, depending on the date of the restriction, and depending on what your legal counsel may advise, um, the uh, invalidation of these by the state may or may not apply. So we just leave it at that for the moment. That'll be a topic we're going to cover later on in our discussions. Neil, go to number two, slide number two, real quick. All right, here's a report from the city of Ashland relating to uh, the total number of dwelling units that they have, 10,062. They have a total of 219 ADUs today. And a scroll down, Neil, if you would, it shows the ADU permits from 2012 to 2026. Since they've had ADUs as a conditional use going back to 1991, uh, the estimate here of 219 is a pretty good estimate. Uh, and because, point I was trying to make earlier, because Ashland has been promoting ADUs and they've got a terrific program guide, uh, they're getting 19, 20, 21 applications per year. Since they're 10 times our size, that would translate to maybe two per year for us. And I'm sure we can make these documents available for
Mm-hmm.
anyone either by email or I would imagine on the city's website.
We'll have Neil put them online as part of this housing work as a document.
Okay. Scroll to page two here real quick, Neil. One of the constraints that they mentioned two constraints on the number of ADUs that they'd like to have a lot more. Um, But construction costs and financing costs have limited the number of ADUs. And my comment here is that have the same constraints, but we're also constrained by the number of lots where an ADU might fit, slopes, watersheds, and wetlands. So um, folks that are concerned about every house in Yaha's getting an ADU, it's not possible. All right, let's go to the next slide, Neil. And then,
I thought the financing information was fascinating too. You want to hit on that a little bit? It was on the last
oh,
slide.
we can if you want. Um,
Yeah.
I just did a quick look on financing options for ADUs. Fannie Mae has 3 programs for ADUs, one of which includes a homeowner buying a house that has an ADU already and then allowing for the homeowner to use some of the rental income from the ADU to qualify for the mortgage. And that even includes their first-time homebuyer program, which is kind of cool. Part of my research is to track down retail mortgage lenders that offer these Fannie Mae programs. I don't have that information yet. Okay, next slide. And we'll get to the meat of this here. All right. This morning, our Planning Commission Chairman Mark Sakamoto asked about Ashland's experience relating to some of the items that people have expressed concerns about, whether or not they had a significant increase in building activity, a significant increase in professional developers, significant increase in traffic, population, parking problems, strains on infrastructure, crime, and a change in the character of the neighborhoods. And if you scroll down, Neil, Linda Reed, the housing director at Ashland, responded, as you can see. They've not had an increase in any of the concerns listed. She said for some of the items, they've not undertaken any assessments either. They haven't gone out of their way to really dig into the details. But in general, their ADU program has been a plus and has not harmed their character of the community. All right, let's go to the next slide, Neil. And I'll make this real quick, Bobby, because we need to have plenty of time for questions and comments. All right, this is from a handout that I had at the community meeting with a couple of additions. If Yachats is to have a zoning code for ADUs, we wanted to have a complete list of standards and guidelines that apply to Yachats. And what I found so far of the communities I've looked at is it's a hodgepodge. We've had some communities have a handful of these, others have a lot of them, and some have some unique ones. So again, I'll let you read through this. Part of our discussion when we get to ADUs in our workshops is going to be to go down this list and identify what fits and doesn't fit. If you will scroll down a little bit to that middle there, that Florence. I talked to the city planner in Florence yesterday, and they have a access concern. They want an ADU, an external ADU, to have a 10 by 10 foot patio, a hard surface walkway between the driveway and the patio, and they have the same setbacks as a single dwelling unit. But this is the only one that I've seen that has basically it's a design standard for accessing the unit. Scroll down if you would, Neil, and we can open this up for folks to chime in on their thoughts on this list as well as any other questions they might have. Bottom line is this is just a list of things we can choose, and we keep adding to the list as we find how more cities, are managing ADUs.
Great. Is there anybody online that has a question they'd like to pop their hand up? Sume, let's hear what you got for us today.
Hi. A few things about what Steve has been talking about. I'd like to have a comparison of Ashland in population, in services, in schools, in ocean views, in tourism. So we would actually be comparing apples to apples. Just a thought.
Sure.
Secondly, you guys do not produce policy, so you will not be discussing whether or not there's a policy on vacation rentals, and you've never mentioned B&B use, which is essentially a vacation rental without a vacation rental license for ADUs. And if you folks would please stop giving estimates that you don't know. You've already said that the 3 people want ADUs, so, well, that's not very many. And you're giving these estimates back and forth. You have no idea. I have no idea. So my every single house that can, and your only three that can't, are about as worthless to both of us. So if you folks would just please stop making those opinions when that's what they are. Um, and that just give me the second and I will read what the attorney had to say about ADUs, since we don't just put it on the website. As a small city, Yachats is not required to provide for the development of ADUs or middle housing. And then they give a bunch of Oregon numbers. As part of its initiative to support affordable housing, DCL recommends small cities allow ADUs, but these recommendations are not obligation on Yachats. This is from the city manager, I'm sorry, the city attorney about Yachats. We're too small. We're a small city as related to middle housing obligations. And it also said that ADUs aren't even part of middle housing. So that kind of slipped in there. So just a few things that I heard today that did not really hold true. And I do really want a comparison of Ashland because
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
okay,
Um, would you please specifically tell me what I said that wasn't true?
that you could make policy. You guys at the planning commission do not have the ability to say that these will not be vacation rentals. The city council is the only one that can make policy. You can suggest,
They
but
can
they can.
they can make the recommendation though with their
That's
Let me,
recommendation
right.
list.
can I
I
address,
understand
can
that. I
I,
understand, but that's not making policy.
can I address this very quickly?
Sure.
Maybe I missed a paragraph or a comment about what our role is. My understanding, and I'm new to the planning commission, but my understanding is that we're providing recommendations to the city
Mhm.
council.
Yes,
Yes.
you are.
That's it. We don't make policy. We can't pass any of this. That's
And
not our job.
right.
Okay.
Okay. I'm
I'm
glad
with
you
you on that.
said that
Correct.
because that's not the way it came out in the beginning.
Okay. What I
Um,
said, what I said, let me explain. What I said was we're going to be discussing possible policies to present to the city council. And if I didn't say it
okay.
exactly the right way, I'm sorry.
Okay. That's fine. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's all I have
Yep.
at the moment.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions that we've got? Looks like we've got Lauren Castellino with her hand up. Go ahead, Lauren.
Okay, I'm happy to let someone else because I've been saying a lot. But anyway, Steve, one, I want to thank you. I thought that was obviously you're doing a lot of work on this. You're paying attention and a lot of interesting presentation there. I do, on the other hand, or not on the other hand, but also feel like I'm in accord with a lot of what Sue May just said. That and this has been a kind of troubling aspect for me all along. When something is presented that seems inaccurate by the people who are in the position of making the decisions, it's hard to know how to relate to that. And Bobby, I was hoping you would jump in when Steve said that, Portland's uptake rate of ADUs was, so small or based on housing that was not just ADUs, because in the article you sent me, it does in fact say.
I did not send you that article. Past planning commission member sent you that article, and it was talking about middle housing as a whole. So I think what Steve said is more accurate than the.
Okay, I'm gonna have to review it. That's not my memory,
Okay.
but maybe I'm inaccurate. See, it's such a
Mhm.
complex issue, right, with so many
Mhm.
details, and that's why it is
Yes,
hard for
it
any of
is.
us, I think, to fully be
Mhm.
accurate around it. Um, but I do just want to clarify that it is possible to wind up with an ADU that is as high as 30 feet if it's built on a garage that's attached to a house, or if somehow a detached garage is deemed necessary to be preserved in order to maintain off-street parking, and therefore the ADU might be allowed to go up to 30 feet. Is that an accurate statement on my part?
Catherine, you want to answer
Yeah.
that?
Yes, Lauren. So if an ADU were done through an internal conversion, 30 feet would be allowed because it's possible the existing home is already 30 feet. Uh, under the draft code right now, the 15-foot height restriction only applies to a detached ADU. So if an addition were
Catherine,
placed on the house,
I don't need, unless what I said was inaccurate, I don't need you to kind of restate, I think, what's been
okay,
stated.
then what you said is accurate.
Thank you for that. And then, I, you know, I guess, I started paying attention to this code when I realized that we were predicting a need for 270 more houses with an increase in population of 240 people over 20 years. And that just made my mind kind of go, what? Even if every 240 house that was built had only one person in it, we still have 30 additional houses. And so my attention was like, why are we promoting and propagating a problem that we already have, which is 60% of the housing that currently exists being unoccupied, and also with such a high percentage of our homes being short-term rentals compared to almost anywhere else. And so I still have that issue with actually any of the optional changes. I'm not in favor of reducing the green space, of reducing the views, of creating wind and shadow corridors for unoccupied homes. Because everyone else who spends time here, including the tourists, which I think are important to the town, is not going to enjoy the town or find it as human scaled or as attractive. And so, why aren't we tending to the problem we have before expanding that problem? And why would we, like, I'm wondering how many ADUs do we have? You know, like, do we even know? And this rate of projected growth, it is not an apples to apples comparison. Ashland's a very different situation. And how would we, be careful about the views and the encroachment on privacy? I haven't heard anything in terms of how ADUs would be, you know, somehow restricted from doing that. And the whole time, Steve, as far as I understand, 1,000 feet size is what's been in the code. And I haven't heard anyone in a planning commission meeting say, hey, we're not doing 1,000 feet. Maximum we're talking about is 800. So I'm not sure where you came up with that number. Those are some of the things.
I'll jump in right there and say that there, in our last conversation, in the line by line, it definitely was brought up, and it was absolutely talked about with the size, and it is brought onto our list. It's on our list of things to talk about. So yes, it is what is in the draft code, but as we have said, the draft. This is the draft, and we are about to begin going through all of those edit points that have been
Well,
discussed
let
or
me jump in
pointed
if I
out
could.
throughout the process. And go ahead,
Yeah,
Stephen.
the list of ADU standards that we put up, that fourth slide, uh,
Mhm.
this is basically a compilation of guidelines that I pulled from a lot of different cities, like 9 different cities in Lincoln County. Um, so it's kind of a throw everything into the mix for discussion. And the 1,000 square foot number comes out of a state law that relates to cities out, not our size. So the communities that I surveyed are generally 800 or 900 square feet. And I recommended, and again, since I wrote this document, I can put whatever I want on it, subject to input from everybody, uh, including everybody here. But I basically thought, well, my preference would be something smaller in a backyard because it would fit in better. Um, so that 1,000 square foot number was more of a placekeeper from the consultant and is not under consideration, I don't think, at this point. Now, I don't know that we have anybody on the planning commission that wants to push for anything more than 800 square feet at this point because we haven't even started talking about it yet.
There were several things that were mentioned there, Catherine. Is there anything else you wanted to talk
Yeah,
to
maybe I'd like to
Lawrence,
address
Stephen?
the question or comments about our absentee ownership rate. Um, the reason that um, any of the projections that are being used did not assume any change in our 60 or 65% second home rate is that we're not making policy right now, and that would require some policy decisions on the part of the city. Different ideas, different things have been tried in different cities. Vacant home tax, for example. Um, but right now, and the consultants were very clear about this, they said, here is the pattern of usage over the last 20 years. We can only assume that that will continue to be the case unless there are some policy changes. So discussion to be had on the council level, maybe not for the planning commission.
Hmm. Nicole, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Hey, um, kind of a statement, observation. I'm a new resident, just, about 3 years, but I'm fortunate that my bestie is generational here. We keep our horses together, and her dad actually, I think, cut the road up here on Horizon Hill. So I get to hear this generational perspective, particularly because my home's on Horizon Hill, how nobody thought that there'd be homes up here, right? And there's homes up here, and I'm lucky enough to have my forever home up here. And so what I hear most in these conversations is people that really care about this community. And I don't want to bring up the divisiveness that, of course, we all know, but there's egos that are involved, right? Like people are very attached to work that they've done or to see something happen. And I believe that the motivation is pure. Like I we spend time here, we live here, we want everyone that works here to have a place to call home that's close to their work that works for them. And I don't think that that's up for debate. But going back to like never having a home on Horizon Hill and look what exists. Once the toothpaste is out of the tube and it starts happening, we have less control. So I think the fear or my concern about passing, a big chunk of these changes altogether is just that. Is it going to happen overnight? No, but our small homes that are down on the flats, that, maybe aren't suitable for whomever's going to buy that lot, become a bigger home and make these changes over time. I think that's a possibility, and it's being putting egos aside, putting maybe a lot of work aside, and slowing it down, passing what's required to be passed for the state, getting right with that. If we have to raise funds to do the other part more mindfully, then let's do it. I think that we can be a community that does this the right way. And I think we're moving in that direction. But I just often in these meetings and going back and listening to things, it just seems so ego driven, like, oh, we put in all this work, or oh, these people are NIMBYs and all of this stuff, when it doesn't need to really be like that. Because I don't think anyone is trying to restrict folks from having a home here. I think they're just trying to protect what Yachats kind of is, if that makes sense. That's it.
Steve, you
I
have to
would
use
love
that.
to hear the financial aspect of what it costs to separate it, because I hear that that's a concern. And to see if we can't, if it's a financial matter, if there can't be funds that are applied to that, to where this other part, we satisfy the state and then take this other part piece by piece, because we have the volunteers, we have the willingness, to do it in a in the right way. I see another hand up, so thanks for letting me just spew that.
I don't think that's a spew at all. Can I jump in real quick? Um, as I
Go for it,
mentioned at the
Steve.
top of my presentation, the Planning Commission is just now on August 17th going to begin talking about these optional items, the 6 optional items. So the break apart conversation is a part of that, but the Planning Commission hasn't even started on these optional things yet. And so after the next couple of workshops, I think the community will have a better idea on the size and volume of the changes that the Planning Commission is going to recommend. But we got a bunch of steps to go through first. So
It takes time too, because we can only have meetings when everybody can get together, and they're all public meeting requirements. So just it does take time for us to move through all of this. Um, the you were asking about the fee for the splitting apart. I shared in the last planning commission meeting that it cost 7,500, and that we were going um, to DLCD to see if they would have further funding for that, and I will be reporting back on that to the planning commission in our next meeting. And Jim Paul, you have a hand up. And I'm just going to give us a reminder that we're at a time check for 3:55. So we've got 5 minutes. If Jim Paul pops in, looks to be our last question, comment, statement?
Was I muted? Am I muted? We can hear you
You
now.
are unmuted now.
Okay.
We hear you
Maybe
now.
maybe I was muted. I'm sorry. Steve, what's your understanding of how the comprehensive plan fits into all of this and what impact it has on the discussions taking place now? As you say, just about to start up on the optional proposed changes.
Well, I'm certainly no expert on the comprehensive plan. I've read it a couple of times. Um, the, um, the comprehensive plan does discuss how housing fits into the community and fits into our natural setting and character. And we are talking about and make the part of the recommendations maybe to the city council will be slight revisions to the comprehensive plan that would allow for different styles and types of housing that other communities are using that we're not. Um, when it's all said and done, who knows? We may go down the road with not very many changes at all, and the comprehensive plan would not be violated whatsoever. So obviously, everything that we do and the city council does is driven by the comprehensive plan. Now, that said, and Catherine, you can chime in here. The comprehensive plan has not had any changes for what, about 20 years?
There've been a couple. There've been a couple of small tweaks more recently than that. It has not. We're not required because of our population size to do a regular review. So I think the last time we went beginning to end was close to 20 years ago. So
Catherine,
yes, Jim.
the last time it was reviewed was in 2019, and the municipal code of Yachats requires that the planning commission review it every 2 years at least, and it has not
Well,
been reviewed since then. And my understanding when I was on the commission was that we should be doing that, and we were in default, and that it is a place where you focus on policy. In my
I'd be
view,
glad to address that.
I'm sorry, I haven't finished. And where that was a place where policy is primarily discussed before adopting codes to implement that policy. And I just want to be sure that the Planning Commission is paying attention to it. And it sounds like from what Steve says that the commission is going to be paying attention to it.
Yes.
That's good.
Catherine, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, that was not quite accurate in terms of either city or state requirements. But yes, the plan is to propose to modify the comprehensive plan to address our housing needs analysis. That basically the comprehensive plan consists of a set of goals. Each goal is then followed by some policies that would implement that goal and actions that support those policies. So under our meeting housing needs, there will probably be some proposed revisions based on our housing needs analysis and housing implementation plan.
Bobby, can we go over
Okay,
our time,
so
or are we
yep,
going to wrap up?
we're gonna wrap it up here. It's 3:58. So I mean, if we have one last quick sentiment, we can give that, or I'm gonna wrap it up here. What do you have anything you want to say, Steve?
We have someone that's chiming in here.
Oh, okay.
iPhone.
Was there somebody who was asking a question from iPhone?
Yeah, Jen Holla. Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Dan
Hi.
Holla. Hello?
Question, it's quick. So when the consulting folks came and talked to you guys, why was it presented to you folks as not separated? These are mandatory and these are optional, or whatever you want to call it. I don't understand why that wasn't separated out in the very beginning. Why has it been combined all together?
So maybe I can speak real quickly to that. That was made clear from the outset, and the mandatory changes were sort of set aside because there wasn't much to discuss there. So from the very early meetings, there was a list of the mandatory changes, and then code concepts, as Cascadia Partners put it, that were optional. So there hasn't been any confusion on the part of the folks who've sort of been following this since day one. I realize there's been some confusion in the last couple of years, and yeah, I can't fully explain why that seems not to have been clear to everybody from the beginning, but there was never any kind of subterfuge there or confusion on the part of the consultants or the planning commission at that time back in 2022.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, okay. And thank you for that last question there. We've reached 4 o'clock, so I'm going to wrap up this Zoom session on ADUs. Next week is the last week we have scheduled for continuing on these sessions. Our session number 7, which would have normally been held on Thursdays, is going to be on Wednesday, August 12th at 3 p.m. So make sure to write that down. It differs a little from what we've been doing. So next week, Wednesday, August 12th, we will have a session on the do nothing alternative. I imagine there'll be a lot of talk about the separating out the codes and what needs to happen there and what the optional things are there. Then following that, on Friday, August 14th, is the last session focusing on character, view, and environment. Thank you all for tuning in and your engagement, and have a great weekend. Happy Friday.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody. Thanks for your attention.